This was supposed to be the comeback moment, the redemption arc, the carefully staged Hollywood return where applause drowns out criticism and cameras finally capture triumph instead of tension, but instead it became the moment everything unraveled. Because according to Tom Bower, what happened at Sundance wasn't just embarrassing, it was catastrophic, and the deeper you look, the uglier it gets. Tom Bower didn't whisper this time. He didn't hint. He didn't hedge. He detonated. Multiple sources at Sundance told him something that instantly reframed the entire spectacle. Meghan Markle may not have even watched the documentary she was passionately promoting. Let that sit for a second. The speeches, the praise, the moral posturing, all of it possibly delivered without actually sitting through the film itself. And then came the numbers. 150 empty seats. Not 5, not 15, 150. At Sundance, a festival where people sleep in cars, stand in snow, and beg ushers for last-minute cancellations. And then the third strike, the Girl Scouts organization, reportedly furious, blindsided, and scrambling to distance itself from a film that quietly exposes something far darker than anyone on that stage acknowledged: child exploitation hiding behind pastel badges and cookie boxes. And that was just the opening act. What surfaced in the following 48 hours turned whispers into wildfire. Behind the curated smiles and designer outfits, the story unfolding wasn't about empowerment or nostalgia. It was about optics collapsing in real time. Picture it clearly. Meghan sweeping into Sundance like royalty returning from exile, every pose calculated, every word polished, thanking everyone for supporting what she called a powerful documentary. But the people actually inside the building saw something else entirely. A disconnect so obvious it made seasoned festival veterans exchange looks. The performance on stage didn't match the film on screen. And that gap, that uncomfortable, undeniable gap, is where the controversy started to spiral. Here's what Tom Bower's sources revealed once the lights went down. This wasn't some overflow screening tucked away at midnight. This was a scheduled Sundance showing. And yet, entire rows sat empty. Staff were quietly ushered in to fill gaps, not because of last-minute rushes, but to make the room look less abandoned. Even then, 60 to 70 seats remained unfilled when the film actually began. At a festival where scarcity is currency, emptiness speaks louder than booze. It told a story no press release could spin. Anyone who has ever stepped foot in Sundance knows how abnormal that is. These theaters don't breathe, they suffocate with bodies. Films sell out before you finish clicking refresh. So when Harry and Meghan's documentary couldn't pull a crowd, insiders didn't see bad luck. They saw a warning sign. Because Sundance isn't where finished, wanted projects go to celebrate. It's where unwanted projects go to shop for survival. If Netflix wanted this film, it would already be streaming. If a major distributor believed in it, there'd be no scrambling in Park City. Sundance wasn't the victory lap. It was the clearance aisle. And here's where Tom Bower's reporting cut especially deep. Meghan claimed they'd worked on this project for 2 years. 2 years of vision, 2 years of intention, 2 years of purpose. But according to insiders, Netflix took one look and passed. No interest, no confidence, no deal. So what did that leave? A red carpet performance selling a film about cookie sales as if it were a cultural milestone. The desperation wasn't subtle. It was palpable. And for those watching closely, almost painful. Then came the moment that changed everything. Tom Bower spoke directly with people who actually sat through the screening. Their reactions weren't divided, they weren't mixed, they were unanimous. Many genuinely believed Harry and Meghan never watched the documentary at all. Not speculation, not trolling, first-hand observations. The speeches didn't align with the content. The praise ignored the implications. One attendee summed it up bluntly: they always step in it. Because the film wasn't a feel-good tribute. It was a quiet expose, and nobody on stage seemed to realize it. The documentary lays it bare. Parents paying hundreds, sometimes thousands, upfront for cookie inventory before a single box is sold. Families gambling money they don't have. Success determined not by effort, but by wealth, connections, and online reach. Children coached to charm, to guilt, to perform. Badges earned not through growth, but through bulk purchasing power. This wasn't empowerment, it was pressure dressed up as tradition. And yet, on that stage, the film was celebrated as meaningful, powerful, inspiring. That disconnect didn't go unnoticed. Audience members began whispering. Online commenters started dissecting. Former scouts spoke up. The uncomfortable truth was right there on screen, but somehow completely missed in the speeches. The irony was brutal. A couple famously vocal about protecting children fronting a project that quietly documents financial strain, emotional pressure, and blurred ethical lines, and calling it uplifting. And then came came another revelation buried beneath the chaos. Meghan spoke nostalgically about her own cookie-selling past, but according to Tom Bower's reporting, she was never a Girl Scout. She was a brownie, and brownies don't sell cookies. A small detail, maybe, but in a controversy built on credibility, small details become landmines. Behind the scenes, the Girl Scouts organization was reportedly livid. A disclaimer at the beginning of the film made it clear they had no involvement, no endorsement, no control. Yet suddenly they were dragged into headlines, debates, and backlash they never signed up for. To them, this wasn't advocacy. It was exposure, and it came with consequences. Insiders say the real filmmakers, the ones who spent years crafting this documentary, never wanted Harry and Meghan front and center. Their involvement came late. Their names were added last. 24 executive producers. The Sussexes were the final two. The project was already finished. They didn't build it. They attached themselves to it. And once they did, everything changed. At Sundance, protocol was broken. The directors should have spoken first. That's the rule. Always. But Meghan took the stage, delivered a speech described by witnesses as word salad, thanked Archwell, soaked in the moment, and shifted the focus entirely onto herself. For some in the room, that wasn't confidence. It was tone deafness. By the end of the night, something was clear. This wasn't a triumphant return. It was a warning flare. No distribution deal. Growing backlash. Industry skepticism. And a narrative spinning dangerously out of control. Tom Bower's assessment was brutal and simple. They don't research deeply. They don't understand the projects they attach themselves to, and every venture turns controversial, even when controversy wasn't the goal. And this was only the beginning. By the morning after the screening, the mood had shifted from polite industry curiosity to open side-eye, because word travels fast in Park City and reputations travel even faster. And suddenly, the chatter in private lounges and shuttle lines wasn't about bold storytelling or emotional impact. It was about confusion, contradiction, and how a film that quietly questions a system ended up being publicly praised as a celebration of it. Insiders say the real sting wasn't just the empty seats or the awkward speech or the growing online backlash dissecting every quote. It was the dawning realization among industry watchers that this project had been presented as a prestige return, when in reality it looked like a last-minute attachment to something already finished, already shaped, already carrying a message that didn't match the marketing spin wrapped around it on that red carpet. Because once people actually started talking about the content, not the gowns, not the smiles, not the celebrity factor, the tone changed fast. Festival attendees began describing scenes that felt uncomfortable rather than uplifting. Families stressing over upfront financial commitments. Parents pushing children to hit sales targets tied to rewards they couldn't otherwise afford. Girls being taught subtle emotional tactics to persuade adults to buy more. What some viewers saw as entrepreneurial spirit, others saw as pressure placed on kids too young to understand the weight of it. And the more that interpretation spread, the more Meghan's glowing description of the film started to sound detached from what was actually on screen. That disconnect became the headline behind the headline, because it wasn't just critics saying it, it was ordinary festival goers, bloggers, commenters who had no agenda beyond recounting what they watched. They weren't attacking, they were puzzled. How did the people presenting this documentary not address the uncomfortable parts? How did the speech skip over the very tension the film seemed to explore? And then Tom Bower's new claims poured gasoline on that confusion. According to his sources, the involvement from Harry and Meghan came so late in the process that their contribution was more branding than building. The film existed, the narrative existed, the footage existed. Their names were layered on top like a glossy label added just before release. In Hollywood terms, that's not creative leadership, that's executive association. But at Sundance, the presentation blurred that distinction. And to seasoned observers, that looked less like collaboration and more like positioning. And positioning is risky when the project itself is divisive. Behind closed doors, industry chatter reportedly turned blunt. Some producers allegedly regretted the celebrity attachment, realizing too late that instead of elevating the film, it had redirected attention away from the filmmakers and onto a swirling controversy they never intended to headline. The spotlight shifted from story to spectacle, from subject to Sussexes. And once that happens, control of the narrative slips away. Meanwhile, the absence of a distribution deal hung over everything like a silent verdict. Because at Sundance, buzz equals buyers. Strong reactions lead to meetings. Meetings lead to contracts. But as days passed, there were no announcements, no celebratory press releases, No streaming giant swooping in, just silence. The kind of silence that makes insiders raise eyebrows without saying a word. For critics already skeptical, that silence said plenty. It fed into a larger narrative that had been building for months. Projects announced with fanfare that quietly fade, deals that don't renew, ventures that launch loudly but land softly. And now, this documentary, meant to signal creative momentum, was being discussed more for the controversy around its presentation than for its filmmaking. Tom Bower's framing of the situation was ruthless. He portrayed it not as bad luck, but as a pattern, attaching to causes without fully grasping their complexity, speaking in sweeping praise without addressing nuance, entering spaces meant for craft and turning them into stages for personal rebranding. Whether fair or harsh, that interpretation spread because it fit a storyline people were already primed to believe, and the timing made it worse. Just days before Sundance, headlines had focused on other professional setbacks. So instead of feeling like a fresh start, the festival appearance felt, to some observers, like an attempt to reset the narrative through visibility alone. But visibility without alignment can backfire, and in this case, critics argued that it did. Online, clips of the speech circulated next to excerpts describing the film's tougher themes. The contrast was jarring. Comment sections filled with variations of the same question: did they actually understand the message? That question alone became more damaging than any single accusation, because it struck at credibility, the currency that public figures rely on most. Meanwhile, supporters tried to shift the conversation back to intention. Maybe the goal was to highlight resilience. Maybe the focus was meant to be on ambition. Maybe the darker interpretations were overreactions. But in the court of public perception, uncertainty rarely benefits the person at the center of the storm. And so the controversy spiraled, exactly as the title suggests, not in one explosive moment, but in tightening circles of doubt, commentary, and industry skepticism. By the end of the festival, the Sundance appearance wasn't being remembered for artistic triumph. It was being remembered as a case study in misalignment between message and marketing, between content and commentary, between intention and impact. Tom Bower's latest claims didn't create the fire. They simply gave it structure, narrative, and a voice that cut through the noise with sharp, unforgiving clarity. Because in the end, this wasn't just about a documentary. It was about perception versus reality, about the risks of stepping into complex conversations without fully engaging with them, and about how quickly a moment meant to signal revival can instead become another chapter in a growing list of public missteps. And if Sundance was meant to mark a turning point, it did, just not in the direction anyone on that red carpet seemed to expect. Carpet seemed to expect. Carpet seemed to expect. Carpet.